You've been doing everything right, eating clean, exercising, but somehow you're still not feeling your best. Your energy's dragging, your memory is slipping, and it's frustrating because you know there's more to your potential. Well, what if the issue isn't just in your routine, but it's deep down inside your cells? You're investing in the best supplements, working out regularly, and sticking to a clean diet. But if your cells are stuck in what's called cell danger response, all the hard work might not be paying off as it should. Think of your cells like a house under renovation. You can bring in the highest quality materials like the best supplements and clean foods, but if the workers inside the house are on lockdown because of a storm, nothing gets done. The materials just pile up unused. That's what happens when your cells are in CDR. They can't fully use the good stuff you're giving them. Getting out of CDR, the cell danger response, is the key to unlocking your body's full potential. When your cells are no longer in protective mode, they can finally use the nutrients, hormones, and energy you're working so hard to provide. That's when everything starts to click. Your energy improves, your workouts become more efficient, and you start to feel like yourself again. Go to beyondbloodwork.com to learn how to break free from cell danger response and make the effort pay off. Hey everyone, welcome to Dr. Josh Axe Show, where each and every week we explore the science and principles behind how to grow in body, mind, spirit, and take your health and your life to the next level. On today's episode, I'll be going through the top 10 signs you have an iron deficiency and natural ways to boost your iron. Now, if you're a person that's struggling with low energy, this is a big one. There are so many people, in fact, you're gonna be very surprised by the statistics and how many people are suffering with iron deficiency around the world. And if you have a certain medical condition, it may also be causing you to have an iron deficiency. Also, did you know that if you consume certain foods together, your body won't be able to absorb iron as well? So I'll be going through all of that and more on today's show. But before I dive in, also make sure to subscribe to the show and to my weekly newsletter that you'll find in the link to the show notes. And in this weekly newsletter, you're going to be getting some incredible content. If you love more advanced nutrition content, I'm writing and putting in a lot of things that you're not going to necessarily find on the show in this newsletter as well. So make sure to subscribe both to the show and to the newsletter, which you'll find in the link in the show notes. So let's talk about why iron is so important to the body. Iron is crucial for producing hemoglobin, which is a protein in your red blood cells that carries oxygen from your lungs to the rest of your body. And you literally cannot function and live without iron. Without enough iron, your body can't produce enough healthy red blood cells, leading to fatigue and other serious issues. So again, remember this, if you're struggling with fatigue, one of the most common issues is related to iron deficiency or a lack of your body not being able to absorb iron or use iron properly. And a study was published in the very prestigious medical journal, The Lancet, and they found that nearly 1.62 billion people worldwide suffer from iron deficiency, making it the most common nutrient deficiency globally, I believe, along with vitamin A. And iron is essential for oxygen transport, DNA synthesis, and energy production. So if you want to have energy, again, you're hearing a common theme here, you need to have iron in proper amounts if you want to have healthy blood. And studies show that from over 200 countries and found that around 30% of the world population is iron deficient, especially women and children. So think about that. Nearly 30% of the entire world's population is deficient in this one mineral. And as I mentioned, iron has numerous important roles: oxygen transport, energy production, brain health. In fact, iron helps with cognitive function, including memory, focus, and learning. It's also important for immune function. It strengthens the immune system and helps our body fight infections. And you'll find this with a lot of different minerals, and this is something we're going to cover in future episodes. But iron, zinc, selenium, and other in copper actually all work together to fight off pathogens and parasites and other viral infections that we might be exposed to on a regular basis. In fact, I want to mention this. I've worked with a lot of patients with Lyme disease, and almost always when I work with patients with Lyme disease, they have issues with iron, low iron levels. And we'll dive into more of those conditions here in a moment as well. Also, let me talk about why your body needs iron and what it does in your body according to the medical research. And there's a study done on iron with 500 individuals. And those with low iron had a 20% higher chance of developing infections than those with normal levels. And whether that be Epstein-Barr, CMV, Lyme, mold, any type of infection, long COVID, those people with low iron are most susceptible. And according to the World Health Organization, low iron levels are associated with fatigue, cognitive decline, and increased risk of infection. So we see this across the board, whether it be the CDC, the World Health Organization. This is something talked about in ancient Chinese medicine in terms of making sure that your blood is healthy and that you have enough iron. All right, so let me walk you through the most common medical conditions associated with iron deficiency. Of course, number one is anemia or iron deficiency anemia. And this is the most common direct result of iron deficiency and occurs when the body lacks enough iron to produce hemoglobin. And this leads to reduced oxygen transportation throughout the blood. And it's the most common form of anemia globally. But basically, your body cannot take oxygen from one area to another. And all of your organs, all of your cells need oxygen to function properly. In fact, this is even associated with things like cancer. In fact, there's a famous physician, his name was Otto Warburg, and he said that cancer cells cannot thrive in an oxygenated environment. And when you lack iron, your body cannot get oxygen out to these cells and tissues. Now, the second most common condition associated with iron deficiency is chronic fatigue syndrome. And some studies have suggested that iron deficiency, even without anemia, might contribute to fatigue experienced in chronic fatigue syndrome. Even though the relationship is not fully established, I've seen this in clinical practice, is that oftentimes patients I've had with chronic fatigue syndrome do have low iron or ferritin levels on their blood work. Now, the third is Lyme disease. And although not directly linked to iron deficiency, chronic illnesses like Lyme disease can cause inflammation and changes in nutrient absorption, which may lead to iron deficiency in some cases. So again, if you have any of these conditions, you may consider consuming more of the foods in the supplements I'm going to talk about in just a few minutes that support iron levels in the body and oxygenation. Another big one is celiac disease. This is an autoimmune disorder that affects the small intestine and interferes with nutrient absorption, including iron. And so, and the other thing that happens here is not only with celiac disease are you not absorbing iron, you may not be absorbing other nutrients that your body needs to work with iron in order to support oxygen transportation or build your blood. Some of those nutrients we'll get into in a few minutes as well that you need for iron absorption, because I see this often. Sometimes people go and take an iron supplement, and it actually, let me say this, most iron supplements today, they're hard on the digestive tract. So there's a very specific type of form of iron you want to be getting. And you also want to make sure you're taking iron with the right other cofactors and nutrients to support the absorption into your system. Now, the number 5 condition most associated with iron deficiency is inflammatory bowel disease or inflammatory bowel diseases. Conditions such as ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, IBS can cause iron deficiency due to gastrointestinal bleeding and poor iron absorption. And then there's chronic kidney disease, iron deficiency, which is caused due to reduced erythropoietin production and chronic inflammation. And then we see heart failure. Patients with chronic heart failure often suffer with iron deficiency, which makes their symptoms even worse. And then a few others here, and this is something many women, of course, most women go through, and that's pregnancy. Due to an increased iron demands for fetal growth and increased blood volume, iron deficiency is common during pregnancy, especially the second, third trimesters, but also sometimes post-pregnancy. And here's the reason for this. When your body is creating certain new when your body's creating a new human, but also certain tissues, your body needs needs more blood. Okay, when we're talking about the placenta specifically, it's made up of a lot of collagen and a lot of blood. Okay, and so your body has to work harder, create more blood. This is sometimes when women get into that second and third trimester, along with carrying extra weight from a newborn, they're also dealing with oftentimes a blood deficiency. And so this is something I'm very conscious of when I work with women who are going through a pregnancy, is giving them foods that are really going to help build up and strengthen their blood. And the other thing that happens, of course, during the birth process is oftentimes a serious amount of blood is lost. And in Chinese medicine, one of the biggest things that ancient physicians focused on that first 1 to 3 months after pregnancy was building the blood in women. And so there were specific soups, specific meals that were given, specific herbs to help build the blood back in women. In fact, in Chinese medicine, it's typically known that one of the biggest causes of postpartum depression is actually blood deficiency. Because if you have a blood deficiency and you feel weak and tired, it actually affects your body's hormone production, and it also affects your mood. And so if you are going to be pregnant in the future or have been, just be aware it's very, very important that you pay attention to building and strengthening your blood. Now, one of the ancient remedies for doing this was consuming the placenta after the meal. And something my wife did, Chelsea, is after we gave birth to both of our children, or she gave birth, we had her placenta encapsulated and she consumed that. And then we also had her taking liver and organ pills and capsules to really help build and strengthen her blood right after giving birth, and for the next 3 months afterwards was very, very important. And this is something that not a lot of women do. And if you're a woman who has given birth, and maybe it's even years later, and you've noticed you still don't have the energy you should. Now, some people might say, well, you're getting less sleep due to having kids and nursing and a number of those things. Yeah, that might be part of it. But I do think there's often cases where women have lost a lot of blood. They've never built their blood back up. And then that leads to low energy afterwards. And so this is why the topic around iron is so important. I want to mention another condition associated with iron deficiency, and that's gastric bypass surgery. Surgical procedures that alter the gastrointestinal tract, particularly those that reduce the stomach or small intestine size, can impair iron absorption as well. And the last most common condition is menorrhagia. This is heavy menstrual bleeding. Women with excessive menstrual bleeding are at a higher risk of iron deficiency due to blood loss, according to studies. And so if you are one of those women out there, you want to make sure that you are taking the right supplements, eating the right foods to build up your blood, or you're going to suffer with actually typically more painful menstrual cramps and low energy and a number of other conditions you put yourself at risk for, like weakened immunity, if you don't build your blood back up. Now, I want to dive into the top signs as well that you're iron deficient, and that has to do with, number one is fatigue and weakness, okay? If you've got low iron, you're going to notice you don't have enough oxygen reaching your muscles and your cells and tissues, so you're going to feel tired. The second thing is pale skin and a pale tongue. In Chinese medicine, the number one way you look for anemia or for blood or iron deficiencies, look at the color of the tongue. The tongue should be a bright pink color. If it's more of a dull pink and even has a hint of white to it, that's the sign. That's the telltale sign that you have iron deficiency. So pale skin, pale tongue is a big warning sign there as well. And low iron reduces hemoglobin, which again makes your skin and tongue look pale. And there was a study that found that individuals with anemia often appear pale due to low hemoglobin levels. So this is something that we've known in terms of a symptom that's been around for thousands of years, and even recent studies have shown that pale skin and pale tongue are correlated with iron deficiency. The third thing is shortness of breath. Without enough oxygen in your blood, your body tries harder and harder to get more oxygen. So you'll notice even walking upstairs, you're breathing more heavily than you think you should historically. Dizziness or lightheadedness, cold hands and feet. Iron helps with regulating body temperature, and without it, your extremities can feel cold. Brittle nails and brittle hair. Low iron can make your nails weak and brittle, often causing them to break easily. Headaches. If your brain doesn't get enough oxygen, This causes blood vessels to swell, leading to headaches. In fact, research shows that headaches occur in 20% of those people with iron deficiency, much higher than the normal population. Also, heart palpitations. When the heart has to work harder to pump oxygen, palpitations can occur. In fact, there was a study done on 300 individuals that showed that 15% of people with iron deficiency experienced palpitations due to iron deficiency. Now, here's another big one. Restless leg syndrome. Iron deficiency has been linked with restless leg syndrome, and a study, this was a large-scale study done on 2,000 individuals, found a strong connection between iron deficiency and RLS. Now, in addition, magnesium and potassium tend to be the other nutrients if you are having restless leg syndrome. But again, if you have restless leg syndrome, try iron, try magnesium, and then try electrolytes. Those are the most common deficiencies. And then unusual cravings. Some people crave non-food substances, even dirt or ice when they're low in iron. And a clinical study found that 50% of participants with what's called pica, these unusual cravings, had iron deficiency. So if you have these unusual cravings, it's almost always because you're depleted in some nutrient, and iron is the most common one. Now, I want to walk you through as well blood tests, because this is one of the most common ways that you are going to test for iron deficiency. Now, listen, typically, if you know you have a pale tongue, you've got pale skin, you're struggling with some of the other symptoms we've talked about, like low energy, you likely don't need a blood test because you know that you're likely iron deficient, but also it can be helpful. And there are other things that can cause certain types of anemia symptoms, like B vitamin deficiencies, as an example. The first test you may consider is a CBC, known as a complete blood count. This test measures several components of your blood, including hemoglobin and your hematocrit levels. And low hemoglobin levels are often a key indicator of iron deficiency anemia. The second test is a serum ferritin test. Now, ferritin is a protein that stores iron in your blood. And low ferritin levels suggest that your body's iron stores are depleted, making this test one of the most reliable indicators of iron deficiency. And then as well, a serum iron or total iron binding capacity, known as a TIBC test. This test measures the amount of iron in your blood and how well it binds to proteins. So now let's dive into the natural ways to start to boost your iron levels. And if you're experiencing any of these symptoms we've talked about, you're going to want to do some of these things I'm going to talk about. Now, the first thing that you want to do to boost your iron levels is take an easily digestible form of iron. So when you're taking an iron supplement, you want to look for a high bioavailability iron. Heme iron specifically, which is the sort of iron that you're going to find in animal sources like red meat and organ meats. It's more easily absorbed by the body than non-heme iron, which is from plant sources, and it doesn't require other nutrients to aid its absorption, even though oftentimes you do want to get some of these other nutrients in addition to. The second one is vitamin C. Vitamin C enhances iron absorption, and it's the most significant enhancer of non-heme iron absorption out there, period. So if you're taking an iron supplement, it should almost always have vitamin C with it. Now, the third way to boost iron levels is consume more vitamin A and beta carotene. Vitamin A and beta carotene enhance iron absorption by improving its transportation throughout the body, and it also helps negate some of the negative effects of enzyme inhibitors like phytic acid, which we'll talk about in a moment. For vitamin A, eating organ meats and red meat and carrots and spinach, those sort of foods are going to be helpful. Number 4 is copper. Copper supports iron metabolism, and copper plays an essential role in absorption and transport of iron, and it's something that's oftentimes overlooked. We talk a lot about zinc today, but in order for you to absorb and utilize both zinc and iron properly, you need to have copper. Again, another fantastic source of copper is organ meats like liver, and then also for copper, like things like pumpkin seeds are another good option. And by the way, copper is a really strong anti-parasite. So if you have parasites, this is why they recommend things like pumpkin seeds and papaya seeds, because these are very copper-rich foods. Number 5 here is folate, also known as vitamin B9. This supports red blood cell production. While folate doesn't directly impact iron absorption, it is vital for red blood cell formation in the first place, which can help mitigate the effects of iron deficiency. And then zinc. Zinc competes with iron for absorption, particularly when taken in high doses. And so one thing you want to be conscious of, if you're taking a zinc supplement, do not take it at the same time as your iron supplement. You want to take zinc and iron typically at different times if it's in higher doses, okay? Now, if it's in a food, naturally you've got zinc and iron, it's typically not a problem. But again, if you're taking supplements, you want to take those two apart. Next up is calcium, and this is interesting, okay? When you look at ancient Jewish health laws, even referenced in the Bible, and you look at traditional Chinese medicine, they both believe that you shouldn't consume dairy and meat together. Now, we break this constantly because anytime you have a cheeseburger, you're breaking this rule. Okay, you're having dairy with meat. In fact, when I look at the American diet, and Chelsea and I just took a trip to Italy, dairy and meat are consumed almost every meal together. But here's why it's not recommended from a Western scientific standpoint that you consume meat and dairy together, according to Chinese medicine, is that calcium inhibits iron absorption. And calcium is a major inhibitor of both heme and non-heme iron absorption. So it's best to consume calcium-rich foods like cheese and meat separately, because you've essentially got the calcium in very high amounts in dairy, and you have iron in very high levels in meat. And so they compete for one another. So they're not synergistic, they're more inhibitory of one another. So this is why when we talk about food energy and food combining, typically meat and dairy are not recommended to consume together. In Chinese medicine, and I know a lot of Jewish kosher laws around not consuming those things together as well, but that's the reason why. Now, you may skip that one and try and follow all the other rules, but I did want to mention that calcium and iron are competitive, and it's been and that's been known for thousands of years. Now, here's something that's just as big as calcium, is phytic acid. And phytates, these are known as enzyme inhibitors or inhibitors for iron absorption. And phytates are found in grains and legumes, and they bind to non-heme iron, reducing its absorption. Now, I do want to mention that sprouting or going through a process of fermentation help negate and destroy phytic acid. So for instance, as we're talking about grains here, well, if you take your bread and ferment it and create a sourdough bread, it's not going to inhibit iron anymore, okay? Or at least not to the same degree. Versus if you're just doing grains that are just a traditional grain that's made into a bread or a pasta or that you're just going to eat by itself, it is going to inhibit iron. So just remember that. So this is why historically almost all grains were either sprouted or fermented, because that helped break down and destroy the phytic acid, which then allowed people to fully absorb those nutrients. And I do want to mention consuming vitamin C alongside these foods does help with the phytic acid, but even more importantly, again, sprouting and fermentation. If you're a person with low iron and low energy, anytime you consume a grain, it should either be sprouted or fermented, ideally, if you can, because it's going to help you with the nutrient absorption and getting rid of the negative effects of the phytic acid. Number 9 is regarding polyphenols. Now, polyphenols are something I recommend for longevity, and polyphenols are found in very high amounts in some of the world's most powerful superfoods. Berries are very high in polyphenols. Green tea, olives. There's a lot of foods, okay, that are very high in polyphenols, but specifically the type of polyphenols found in tea, including green tea, white tea, and coffee, inhibit iron absorption. And this is why oftentimes tea should not be consumed with a meal, or at least one that's high in iron. Polyphenols in tea and coffee, and even some vegetables, inhibit non-heme iron absorption, and it's best to avoid these beverages during iron-rich meals. And so this is just saying, hey, when you drink tea, don't drink it at a meal, drink it between your meals is more ideal if you're suffering with low iron levels. Now I want to walk you through the top foods you should be consuming to boost iron absorption. And number 1, by far, hands down, are organ meats. Organ meats like liver, organ meats like heart and kidney. These organ meats are extremely rich in iron, but not just iron, also copper, also zinc, also folate, also many of the nutrients we just talked about that help build your blood and support iron absorption and oxygen transport throughout the body. So organ meats are number one. Number two is red meat, grass-fed beef, bison, elk, venison, lamb, but red meat is going to be tremendous for iron. Next is going to be poultry like chicken and turkey and duck, and then it's going to be seafood like wild caught fish like salmon. These are excellent sources of heme iron, the type your body absorbs best. And there's a study from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition that showed that participants who ate red meat regularly had higher iron levels than those who didn't. And if you're a person who just feels fatigued and weak, red meat will help invigorate your body. And if you can get organ meats, and listen, you can take organ meats as capsules or tablets, but doing organ meats and especially liver is the number one food or supplement for building back your iron levels. Next, let's talk about the non-heme iron foods that are still beneficial. Leafy greens like spinach and kale are especially good when paired with foods rich in vitamin C. And I recommend cooking the spinach and kale and then consuming them with a vitamin C rich food like kiwi or strawberries or citrus fruits. In fact, you could just sprinkle on or squeeze on a little bit of lemon juice onto your spinach or kale as another thing you can do there as well to support absorption as well. And there was a 2016 study that found that combining iron-rich vegetables with vitamin C increased absorption by 50%. Think about that. That's significant. And now you could do this as a salad as well. I'm not saying just cook. So you could do a spinach and strawberry salad as an example of something there that would be a good option for building your blood and your iron levels. And then there are herbs and supplements. Nettles and dandelion have been used for thousands of years for building iron levels. You can drink these as herbal teas. We know dandelion is typically also used as a liver detoxifier. Nettles is often used for seasonal allergies, but these are great for building iron. And studies on nettle tea show that it could boost iron levels by 20% after just 8 weeks of use. And then, of course, as I mentioned, iron supplements. Ferrous sulfate is commonly prescribed, but it's important to take it with vitamin C to improve absorption. And as I mentioned earlier, I really want to encourage you, if you're buying an iron supplement, buy an iron or blood building supplement. Oftentimes you'll see these labeled as blood builders, but make sure you take it from a brand that's known as having food-based supplements. You're seeing foods and enzymes and probiotics and other cofactors and nutrients in there. Like if I'm buying an iron supplement, I'm probably going to look for one that has herbs like dong quai and nettles and maybe beetroot juice, those sort of things in there that also help build and support the blood in there as well. I want to mention that as a food as well. Spinach and kale are amazing. Beets with the leaves of beets, known as beet greens, are probably the best overall for building your blood out there. Let me give you an example of why it's so important if you're taking an iron supplement that you have the right cofactors with it to support its absorption. There is a study done on iron and vitamin C. And the research shows that taking 100 milligrams of iron with 200 milligrams of vitamin C improves absorption rates by up to 67%. So think about that. If you take iron by itself, you're going to absorb, let's say, 1/3 of what you would versus if you take it with vitamin C. And then if you add in some of the other things like an organ meat and do some herbal teas and some of those other nutrients, that number is going to double. You're going to double the amount or more of what you're actually going to absorb if you take iron with the right cofactor. So that's why it's important. And if anytime I have anyone with iron deficiency or anemia or any of these conditions we talked about, you want to make a full-on lifestyle change where you're changing the food you're eating, you're taking the right supplements, drinking the right teas to truly deal with it. I see a lot of times people are like, well, I'm just going to take one pill, like iron. Yeah, that might help a little bit, but if you do some of these other things in combination, it's going to be so much more effective. A few other lifestyle tips. One, I recommend cooking with a cast iron skillet. Cooking acidic foods like tomatoes in cast iron pans can increase the iron content of your meal by up to 16%. And a study published in Science Daily found that food cooked in cast iron had significantly higher iron levels to build the blood. And the last tip I want to mention here when it comes to building your iron is the most historic blood building recommendation along with organ meats that we'd find in Chinese medicine, and that is consuming the herb dong quai. Dong quai is one of the top 10 herbs prescribed in all of Chinese medicine, and it's known to nourish your blood and improve your iron levels. In fact, if you taste dong quai, it tastes like iron or a little bit like dirt, but it tastes metallic. And so if you're craving metal or dirt, or just you have these weird food cravings, there's a really good chance you're iron deficient, and dong quai is an amazing builder of blood and iron levels. And a study published in the Chinese Medicine Journal showed that herbs like dong quai improved iron absorption and helped alleviate the symptoms of anemia. So there's medical research backing dong quai in terms of its iron absorption, building the blood as well in that way. And here's the thing you have to know, as we talked about earlier, there are over 1.6 billion individuals on the planet, mostly women and then children, that are iron deficient. But the good news is it's so treatable. If you're able to go and follow just some of the advice I talked about, take an organ supplement or just eat more red meat, get some of the greens from beets and spinach and kale, take more vitamin C rich foods. If you can just add in some of those things, you're going to feel so much better. Your energy is going to go up. Your blood is going to be healthier. Your immune system stronger. You're going to experience all of those benefits by getting more iron and absorbing more iron into your body. Hey, this is part of a series I'm diving into on nutrients, and I'm going to be covering magnesium, vitamin D, selenium, iodine, vitamin B12, and so much more. So make sure to tune in for some of these, because there are so many medical conditions you're going to find out are caused by sometimes one single nutritional deficiency. Just like an iron deficiency can cause anemia, a selenium or an iodine or a B12 deficiency can cause hypothyroidism. A deficiency in zinc can lead to inflammatory bowel disease. So we'll get into this more in the future, but make sure not to miss out on this series and to learn more about how these nutrients and the foods you need to be eating to get these specific nutrients can help you reverse disease and promote longevity. I want to say thanks so much for tuning in here to the Dr. Josh Axe Show. Remember, each and every week I'm diving deep into the science and principles and how to take your life to the next level physically, mentally, and spiritually. Also, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. And I wanted to say thank you to all of you that are on mission with me. We are helping transform the world and the health of an entire nation and world right now. And so thanks so much for all of you that are on mission with me, sharing this information. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter. It's new. We're putting out incredible content and it's free. You can check it out in the show notes. I can't wait for you to see the newsletter as well. I'll see you on the next episode.